Camilla Brooks never expected her morning coffee to taste like betrayal. But that's exactly what it did when she opened the mailbox and found it. A thick cream-colored envelope with embossed gold trim. Elegant, expensive, familiar. Her heart skipped once, then again. She didn't need to read the return address to know who it was from. Julian Prescott, her ex-husband. The man who once promised forever, then broke it the minute she was no longer convenient. With trembling hands, Camilla slid her finger beneath the seal. She already knew what it was, but the cruelty of actually reading it. Together with their families, Julian Prescott and Savannah Lee, request the honor of your presence. She let out a sharp breath. Savannah Lee, 25, flawless, and constantly splashed across tabloids with a champagne glass in one hand and Julian's arm in the other. Camilla was 46, and the age difference wasn't just obvious, it was intentional. This wasn't just a wedding invitation, it was a declaration, a reminder that she'd been replaced, erased. She stared at the card a little longer, letting the silence press in, letting the shame rise. Then the phone rang. Did you get it? Her sister's voice, Monica, cut through the air like a knife. Camilla closed her eyes. Just did. He really sent it. That arrogant bastard. I think he wanted to make sure I saw it. And felt it. Well, screw that, Monica snapped. You're Camilla Brooks. You survived his lies, his cheating, and that god-awful divorce. You're not hiding. Camilla looked back down at the golden ink, her fingers curling around the edges of the invitation. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, that invitation would be the very thing that set her free. Because when life tries to humiliate a woman like Camilla Brooks sometimes, it ends up waking the wrong kind of fire. And this fire, it wasn't going to burn quietly. There was a time when Julian Prescott was just a man with a pitch deck and a dream. No venture capital, no headlines, just ambition and late-night coffee. And Camilla, she was the one who believed. She wasn't just his wife. She was his backbone, his strategist, the one who stayed up with him tweaking slide decks, who used her own PR connections to get him interviews, who helped him rehearse before every boardroom pitch. She built his image from scratch, shaped it until investors believed he was already a legend. Back then, Julian used to say, "You're the secret weapon. I'd be lost without you." And she believed him. For 15 years, Camilla stood in the shadows so Julian could stand in the spotlight. She gave up a rising marketing executive position to help him build his empire. She walked away from her own dreams, telling herself that their success was worth it, that it was their story. But once the money came, so did the distance. The man who once kissed her hand before meetings now came home late, cold, distracted, whispering texts to numbers he never let her see. The woman who once mattered in every strategy session suddenly became invisible in her own home. It didn't happen overnight. First it was the silence, then the condescension, the way he began saying things like, "You wouldn't understand. It's a tech thing." Camilla remembered the night she found the receipt. A 5-star hotel in Napa. 2 guests, a date that didn't match any business trip she'd known. That was when the curtain dropped. Julian didn't just replace her emotionally, he rewrote the story. He cast himself as the self-made genius, and her A-minor footnote, a faded chapter. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was that for a moment, Camilla believed she really was disposable. Until now, because that invitation, it didn't just reawaken the pain. It reminded her of something far more dangerous, who she used to be, and who she could become again. And just as that fire was beginning to stir, her phone buzzed with a message from him, not Julian, but the last man her ex-husband ever wanted her to talk to again. The message was simple. "Dinner tonight, 7 p.m., my treat. A." Camilla stared at the text for a long moment. Adrian Wolfe, Julian's oldest rival, a man whispered about in boardrooms as too principled to play dirty, but too smart to ever lose. They'd met just once, a charity gala months ago. He was charming, yes, but not in the way Julian had been. Adrian didn't scan the room to measure status. He listened when she spoke. Really listened. Back then, she'd felt like a ghost in her own life. That night, she felt seen. Now, after all this time, he remembered. She almost didn't reply, almost convinced herself it was too soon, too risky, too complicated. But then she looked at the invitation again, still lying open on her kitchen table, like a wound that hadn't closed. And she typed 7 p.m. works. Where? The restaurant was the kind of place with low lighting, soft jazz, and waiters who knew your name before you said it. Adrian stood as she approached, dressed in midnight blue. When he saw her, his eyes softened, not with pity, but with recognition. You look, he started, then smiled. Exactly like yourself. Camilla sat down, her guard still half raised. You heard about the wedding? He nodded. And the fact that he sent you that invitation? That's low even for Julian. A small laugh escaped her lips. You really do know him. Too well, and I know what he's trying to do. She raised an eyebrow. What's that? Adrian leaned in slightly. Make you feel small. Again? But Camilla, he's terrified of you. Because you're the only woman who ever knew the real him and still walked away. And in that moment, something shifted. This wasn't just dinner. This was the start of something. A quiet alliance forged in shared clarity, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something deeper. Camilla took a sip of her wine. So tell me, Adrian, how would you feel about crashing a wedding? Adrian smiled slowly. Now that's a toast I'd love to make. And with that, a plan began to take shape. One built not on revenge alone, but on truth, dignity, and something Julian could never control. Camilla's power reborn. And if you've ever been made to feel small like Camilla, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone, and this channel is where we rise. The wedding day arrived like a glossy magazine, spread perfect blue skies, a cathedral bathed in gold light, and a red carpet lined with photographers. Everything was curated for image Julian's favorite illusion. But across the city, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Camilla Brooks was preparing for something very different. She stood in front of a full-length mirror, draped in a navy blue silk gown that shimmered like midnight. It hugged her curves with unapologetic confidence. Every detail, neckline, earring, scent was chosen for impact. Her sister Monica fastened the sapphire pendant around her neck. He's going to eat his heart out. Camilla gave a small smile. That's not why I'm going. I know, Monica said gently, but it's still a bonus. The moment she stepped out of Adrian Wolf's black car, the flashbulbs exploded. The press had expected Julian's radiant young bride. They hadn't expected his ex-wife to show up looking like power incarnate and on the arm of his greatest competitor. Whispers echoed through the crowd like ripples in water. Inside the church, heads turned. Conversations stopped. Even the music paused for half a beat. Julian saw them instantly. Camilla, Adrian, together. His jaw clenched. The color drained from his face. Camilla walked forward, head high, arm gently linked with Adrian's. Her stride was steady, elegant, like royalty reclaiming her throne. And though she didn't say a word, her presence screamed one undeniable truth. You didn't break me. You only reminded me who I really am. They took their seats near the front, an intentional position within Julian's line of sight. Adrian leaned over, whispering, You sure you're okay? Camilla's eyes never left her ex-husband. I've never been more sure. But just as the ceremony was about to begin, a man in a dark suit stepped into the aisle, then another, then 2 more. They weren't guests, they were federal agents. And suddenly this wasn't just about dresses or dominance. This was about secrets, money, and consequences. Because what Camilla didn't know, what no one in that church knew, was that Julian's perfectly polished empire was already beginning to rot from the inside. And today was the day the rot would be exposed. When the federal agents stepped inside that cathedral, time seemed to freeze. Guests turned. Whispers surged. And from the altar, Julian Prescott's mask cracked just enough for the world to see the panic behind his polished smile. Camilla sat motionless, heart thudding. Adrian leaned closer. They're from the SEC. This isn't a stunt. What's happening? she asked, even as the answer took shape in her mind. Julian was whispering furiously to his best man. His bride, young flawless Savannah Lee, stood frozen near the back veil in hand confusion blooming across her face. And then it hit Camilla like a wave. This wedding was never about love, it was about rescue. Savannah's family was old money, clean money, the kind of lifeline a man with sinking books would marry into before the tide turned. That evening back at Adrian's apartment, the full truth came out. Julian's been cooking the books for years, Adrian explained, pouring her a glass of wine she barely touched. Hiding losses, inflating valuations, creating shell companies offshore. Camilla blinked. But wouldn't the auditors? They only see what he wants them to see, Adrian said. Until someone digs deeper. And someone had. Adrian's private investigators had found links to financial entities registered under names Camilla had never heard of. But one thing connected them all. Her signature. Dozens of transactions, approvals, authorization letters, all bearing her name, her handwriting. But I never signed those, she whispered, feeling her throat tighten. He told me, back then, they were just shareholder updates, legal formalities. Adrian's face hardened. He forged you. Or worse, he got you to sign things without understanding what you were endorsing. Camilla buried her face in her hands. I thought the betrayal ended with the divorce. Adrian knelt beside her. Camilla, he didn't just walk away from your marriage. He weaponized your trust, your reputation. And if this goes public, the media won't stop to ask whether you knew. The next morning, her lawyer confirmed the worst. Julian had used her credentials post-divorce to prop up failing subsidiaries and funnel money into ghost companies. He'd left just enough paper trail to suggest she had been involved. Why, she asked aloud, her voice shaking. Because your name had integrity, Adrian answered quietly. And he didn't. Camilla stared out the window at the city she once helped Julian conquer. Her fists clenched. Her mind raced. Not in fear, but in clarity. He thought she wouldn't fight. He thought she'd stay silent to protect her name. He thought wrong. Because if Julian Prescott was about to be exposed, Camilla Brooks wouldn't just be a bystander. She'd be the storm he never saw coming. If you're still watching, it means you felt what she felt. Don't miss what comes next. Subscribe and turn on notifications. This story's just heating up. When Julian realized the SEC wasn't bluffing, he didn't go quiet. He went on the offensive. Within 24 hours, his legal team began leaking statements to the press that Camilla had always been involved, that she signed every document knowingly, that this was nothing more than a bitter ex-wife's revenge. And worst of all, his mother joined in. Margaret Prescott, always immaculate, always cold, stood on the steps of her estate and told reporters Camilla was never good enough for our family. She used my son, then ran to his rival to finish the job. The headline read, Prescott family blames ex-wife for financial collapse. Camilla sat in Adrian's living room watching it all unfold, her face, her name, her legacy twisted on every network. But this time she didn't cry. She didn't run. She opened her laptop and got to work. 2 days later, Camilla Brooks walked into a press conference not as a woman scorned, but as a woman ready to speak the truth. She stood behind the podium in a sharp navy suit, her voice steady, her eyes direct. I was married to Julian Prescott for 15 years. I helped build the very company now under investigation. But what I didn't know was that the man I built it with was using my trust, my reputation, and my signature to cover his crimes. She laid out emails, timelines, records of her location during alleged signings, proof that she was never where the signatures claim she was. Her lawyers filed an official motion of victim status in the SEC case. Adrian stood beside her, not as her shield, but as her equal, allowing her to own her voice, her story, her fight. That night, as they walked back to the car, Adrian asked quietly, "You okay?" Camilla exhaled. "No, but I'm not scared anymore." He took her hand. "They underestimated you." She nodded. "They always did." But this wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. It was about reclaiming her life. And as the storm of public scrutiny raged on, Camilla Brooks was becoming someone no one could ignore. For the first time in years, Camilla Brooks woke up without dread in her chest. No subpoenas on the table, no headlines twisting her truth, no old ghosts whispering she wasn't enough. Just the soft morning light spilling across Adrian's kitchen and the scent of fresh coffee. He placed a mug in front of her. Cream and cinnamon. Just how you like it. Camilla smiled, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. You remembered? Adrian leaned against the counter. I remember everything about you. It wasn't grand gestures that had healed her. It was the quiet consistency, the way he listened, respected her silence, the way he never made her shrink to fit into his world, but expanded his world to fit her in. Later that week, Adrian took her to a small cliffside villa, private, peaceful, overlooking the sea. As they stood under the stars, he slipped a velvet box into her hand. Before Julian, he said you were already extraordinary. After him, you became unstoppable. I don't want to fix you. I just want to walk beside you. Inside the box was a ring, simple, stunning, hers. Camilla didn't cry. She smiled. Yes, she whispered, not just to the man in front of her, but to herself, to life, to beginning again. Because healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet morning, a steady hand, and the realization that your best days aren't behind you, they're waiting ahead. And Camilla Brooks was finally ready to walk into them. On the mantel in Camilla Brooks's new home sits a single frame. Inside it, the wedding invitation, the one Julian sent thinking it would humiliate her, break her, remind her of what she'd lost. But now, it serves as a reminder of what she found. Because the real revenge was never about showing up and stealing the spotlight. It wasn't about public humiliation or headlines. It wasn't even about exposing Julian's crimes. It was about choosing herself, about walking away from shame, about standing in courtrooms and telling the truth even when her voice trembled, about letting someone love her not for what she could sacrifice, but for who she truly was. 1 year later, Camilla's consulting firm, specializing in corporate ethics and female-led entrepreneurship, had grown faster than anyone predicted. She was in demand, respected, and more herself than she had ever been. At a gala honoring women in leadership, she stood behind a podium and smiled, not nervously, not performatively, but with quiet power. I used to think survival was enough, she told the crowd. Now I know. Thriving is the best answer. Peace is the loudest victory. And love that honors you, that's the sweetest revenge of all. Because Camilla Brooks didn't just win. She became the woman he never thought she'd be, and the woman she always was underneath it all. Have you ever risen from something meant to break you? Share your story in the comments. And if Camilla's journey touched, you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because every woman who rises deserves to be heard.